Hello, everybody. This is Michelle Starr once again with our Mysti stories from experiences on the mystic path. My website is michellestaryoga.com, and I will place that in the description for you. Um, this is the fourth of the series, and there were a couple things that I wanted to go over. The last time we went over stories from connections and visions with nature, and I left one out, and there was a point that I meant to make. If you remember, if you listen to it, where I talked about my dream with the little animals racing by me, um, and they were going to meet God. And I mentioned that I believed, since God is already here, God is everywhere, that it was referring to the Christ consciousness returning. So um, I had mentioned that uh, a turtle that was coming through and there was a puddle there, he could get through the puddle fine, but as he went forward and into the grass, water would appear for him. So everything that turtle needed was there as he stepped forward. And I took that, I interpreted it as being me. Anytime I need anything, Spirit is just going to present it. As I take a step, the earth is going to appear there on my path. And then also that God was behind me, and I felt God, Christ consciousness, had my back. And I meant to make the point from that, that if God has my back and everything that I need is presented as needed, that since we're all one, by extension, God has your back and also will provide everything that you need as you step on your path. So I wanted to make that point. And then there was one story that I left out from nature, and it to me was profound. Again, I was down in the metro parks. That's where a lot of magic has happened for me. I was riding my bike, and it was dusk in the summer, and I was in an area where the bike path was over on one side, there was a parking lot, and then the road was on the other side. So there was an area of woods that was kind of like a peninsula where I was riding by it. I was in the parking lot because you had to cross the road and then go through the parking lot to continue on the bike path. But to my amazement, as I looked over into the woods that were in that peninsula, there were fireflies, lightning bugs, just a mass of them. They lit up the whole woods, and I just stood there dumbfounded, looking at this beauty. It was like more than sparkling lights on a Christmas tree. They were just everywhere in this area. So I was talking with my friend who works as a channeler, and she does psychic work, and she told me that the lightning bugs, the fireflies, were communicating with me. So when these experiences happen, we literally are communing with nature and connecting, and they do communicate through their own language with us. So it was profoundly beautiful. I didn't want to leave. They were just light, 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 light everywhere in this peninsula of the woods. So I remember that, and it is uplifting to me anytime I think of it. So I wanted to get that story in so that you could hear, because I had talked about the bluebirds when they came as a um, migration in the woods. Actually, it was not far from where I saw those fireflies. So maybe it's a magic spot. I don't know. But the whole park is magical to me. I love it. And I love nature. So connecting and communing is peak moments for me. So, so this time we're going from nature to out in the world, experiences, visions, um, spiritual experiences that I've had when I wasn't in nature, when I was just out in the world. So the first one, actually, I was in my apartment for a while, but this went out into the world later. So this story will unfold for you, okay? Um, I was teaching yoga. I had an apartment and I decided to put an ad in the newspaper advertising my business, yoga and healing. And so I got a phone call and the person hung up on me. And it just seemed kind of strange, but it's like, okay, you know, people do that. And then it happened again and again. And then it happened and she didn't hang up. She stayed on the phone. So I'm just talking to her. Can I help you? Is there something you need? Could you speak to me? And she would hang up. It's like, okay. And then these calls where she would call me up and not say anything, they would get longer. So I would just keep talking to her, encouraging her to speak up. Usually, when somebody's doing that, they're afraid. They may have been abused and need help. I didn't know. So I kept with her. And then I asked in one of these calls if she would give me her name, and she did. And then I I tried to talk with her, and again she hung up on me, which you know I could tell she was in need. So you know what's going on here? How can I help? And she called again, and I tried to get an answer out of her. Well, are you local? Do you live near me? And she wouldn't answer any questions. And then she would hang up. It's like, okay, well, we'll see where this goes, if anywhere. Um, I just had a sense I should be patient with her. And then she called again, and she was just like breathing into the phone. It wasn't nefarious or anything. It was just she didn't say anything. So I was starting to get a little frustrated, and I used my imagination here, and I went into the phone. This was before cell phones. This was in the early 80s, okay? Um, so I had a landline, and I just took my awareness into the phone, through the wires, and into the telephone wires outdoors, and boom, I was in her apartment. Remember when I told you I wanted to see the earth from out there and look down on the earth, and boom, I was there, and um, same thing happened. I could see in her apartment, um, and I saw a red desk. Now, I only saw a portion of her apartment, but I said, "Oh, you have a red desk." I mean, it was just kind of spontaneous, came out of my mouth. I didn't mean to scare her anything, and boom, she hung up. It's like, oh boy, what have I done now? So she did call back, and eventually, she let me come over to her apartment. She was like a block and a half away from where I lived. So I would go over and just talk with her. She was very introverted, very quiet. She was actually a school teacher for children, and she adored children. She loved doing artwork with them. Her astrology sign was Cancer, so cancers are very sensitive, and she was a very introverted person, very quiet. She was overweight, but eventually she let me come over for appointments, and we worked with some healing. And I didn't know. I guess it was her father that she finally revealed to me. Now that I'm remembering a little bit more, um, her father had severely abused her. She had been beaten, mistreated, and she was reaching out to me because of my ad in the newspaper. So it was very healing, and we continued to work together for a while, and then she just didn't need me anymore, I guess. We just kind of went our own ways. But I want to come back to that experience where I saw her red desk. I didn't know it at the time. I had never done it before, and it was just a spontaneous thing. But taking my consciousness into her apartment and seeing what was there, I could see some other furniture, but um, my vision was not very broad, so I wasn't seeing a whole apartment, living room, dining room type of thing. It was just part of her apartment where there was the red desk. And when I did get there, yes, indeed, there was a red desk. So um, my vision was clear. And my roommate that was the channeler, she kind of tuned in to the Akashic records, which at that time I didn't know how to do, and said that this woman was alive during Nazi Germany's atrocities, and she was in the army and performed these acts of atrocities on others, coming back in this lifetime, being beaten by her father. um, she was burning off massive karma. So when we leave one lifetime and come into another, our emotional baggage is still with us. It's in our soul, and it still needs to be addressed, whether you know where it comes from or not. It doesn't really matter if you have patterns or stored emotion. It can be dealt with in the present. So you don't have to believe in other lifetimes if that bumps into your belief systems. But I've had plenty of experiences where, for me, that's my truth. Okay. So that's what happened with her. Um, so bless her heart, she was burning off karma and clearing herself of that Nazi Germany energy. By the way, I have distinct recall of being in the Holocaust. Um, I was not Jewish. I was in a concentration camp. And what I remember the most vividly, was looking down at myself, and I'm extremely thin, just skin and bones from starvation in the concentration camp. And some of the soldiers came to pick us up and take us where we didn't know where we were going. We had to remove our clothing. A fellow in the army came and got me. Actually, he was my lover in that life, and he picked me up and carried me, and I could see, I looked over and there was a mass grave. And I said to him, please don't do this. I'm not dead yet. But if he had not done it, he would have been killed himself. So it took me years to heal that issue of being so mistreated and abused and um, starved. And actually, I know the person that was in that life. I met. She was a woman in this life, so we talked about it, and she remembered it too. But he was carrying me to the mass grave, and he did throw me in to the grave. So in this life, I had inklings around being buried alive, and I could feel that and how disappointing and brokenhearted I was because it was my lover throwing me into the grave. But the way I made peace with it was, well, if anybody was going to throw me into a mass grave, it was better that it was someone I knew and loved than some stranger who was mean. And of course, that's pretty mean, but um, who was a stranger. So I made my peace with that and overcame that. As I went through that journey, I would be cleaning house and I'd have the TV on and I'd look over and there would be films of the Holocaust where they were taking naked people into the gas chambers. So it was a very depressing, sad time for me. But that's what we have to do. We have to make peace. We have to release the fear, release the possible anger, and allow light to come in and let our emotions flow again. That causes a blockage. So that's part of being on the mystic path where you clear any blockages, because any blockage we have uh, is a blockage to I talked about communion with nature, communing with God, the source. Um, it's the same thing. If we don't clear this out, we're blocked and we can't commune with the all that is. So I didn't even have that one written down here. So I guess you got a bonus, right? And I hope that doesn't cause any fear in you. It's just a natural process. And some people end up going to a therapist to work through things like this and doing or past life regression or hypnosis, doing yoga for a long time. This being in the 80s, and I started yoga in 1970, I already had some uh, strength built up where I could face these emotional challenges and blockages. So, so that is called when a person takes their consciousness and can see somewhere else. That's called remote viewing. And I never really developed it. I just know it was a natural thing to do. I did have another experience with it. Um, it was not a very pleasant experience. It was a friend, and there was some weird stuff going on there, so I just stayed clear of that. But it did happen again, just naturally. Okay. So for whatever that's worth, if you want to use your imagination and go into meditation and give it a try, more power to you. Um, just surround yourself with white light. Make sure you're in a undisturbed area, and go into a meditation. So my next story is, it entails nature a little bit, but also being out in the world. I went to get my hair done at a really nice salon, and when I went to the entrance, the name of their business was in letters that would light up at night above the entrance. And there was a bird's nest in one of the letters. That always cracks me up. It just, I don't know why, it just does, because birds can find any place for their homes, and there they were. And there were newly hatched baby birds in that nest, and the parents, I could see, was going in to feed them. So it was kind of sweet. But I went in, and my hairdresser's working on my hair, and we're talking, and she she started to wonder about being pregnant. She and her husband were working towards building a family, and I just took the new babies in that bird's nest as an omen. I says, you know, I saw these birds out there, and I think that's an omen that, yeah, you're pregnant. Of course, there are tests for that, but it was early on. So she kept talking about it, like wondering and wondering. And sometimes when I get frustrated, that will take me into this state. If you've ever watched Star Trek, when Scotty beams somebody off the Enterprise, and you see the beams come down and that sound, that's what would happen to me when I would have a vision. And I'm looking at them in the mirror. They had full length mirrors there, and she was standing in front of me at this point, and I'm looking at her in the mirror, and this happened, this beaming, and I saw her, I saw a vision of her, and she indeed was pregnant. And I said, oh my gosh, I just saw you, you're pregnant. And she still didn't believe me. Um, you know, you can only do so much. She didn't know me that well, and certainly probably didn't know how visions work, which is fine. Uh, but she indeed was pregnant and had her child, and went on and had another child too. So it's just nice to have that verified when you're having visions and it's new at it. Okay. So, and then I had another vision. Now, that hairdresser one was also in the mid 80s. The car, the car I had in 2008, I had another vision around my car. I was driving home. I had just gone to see my brother who was in the hospital. And I was driving home, and I was on an area where it's a 4-lane highway that merges into a 2-lane. so people have to slow down. Instead of going 65, they have to go 55 or 60. And I was slowing down, and then there was a car in front of me that was turning left, but they were quite a ways away, so I just kind of slowed down. I didn't have my brakes on, but the car behind me apparently didn't realize that I was slowing down for this car in front of me that was turning, and boom, he ran into me. Now, just before that happened, actually for a couple of weeks, I was getting intuitive messages that I was going to be in an accident. And I kept saying, no, I don't want to be in an accident. I'm not going to let this happen. So it did. But just before it happened, I heard the words, I got the message that I was going to be in an accident. And I just said, no. And I smiled to myself as though that was going to prevent it. Well, it didn't. And there's a reason for that, which I'll go into. But I wasn't injured. I did have a whiplash, but having yoga and yoga therapy training, I knew how to work with that. I did go to craniosacral um, practitioner, and actually she told me that that accident, the impact of it, it actually knocked me out for a second. And I didn't even realize that until much later, like months down the road. It's like, oh, that's what happened. Because when I came out of it, after uh, I slammed my head against the headrest, and that's what knocked me out. Because this fellow, he must have been going 60 or maybe even faster. There was a truck driver woman who saw it happen, and she said he was flying. So he flew right into my car, and it totaled my car. It the impact was so great that above the car windows on both sides, the car was buckled in the roof. So it was quite an impact. But when I went to the craniosacral practitioner, she told me that this bumped me up to the next level. Well, I didn't really know what that meant. Now I understand it's the next level of vibration. And sometimes spirit will create these scenarios so that we're unconscious for a moment, and they can tweak our our internal wiring, our psychic wiring, um, spiritual wiring, and that's what happened, because I'd been rewired many times, and uh, that's just the way they did it on this occasion, because it's been a long journey of all of this. So now I needed a new car. I was self-employed. I did not have the money for a new car or even a used car. So I went to the bank, um, and I talked to them, and then I went to a car dealer that was in my hometown, a very small, kind of a farm community. And this fellow had a car. It was a 1997 Thunderbird, and it was a very nice car. It had a lot of mileage on it, but it just felt good to be in a premium car. He had another car, but it just like was not inspiring. So I took my dad for a ride in that car, just a test drive, and the car worked fine. It drove nicely. It was a big car. If I got hit, I would probably be more protected. I never did, but my dad and I went back to the dealer, and we, of course, went around and opened the hood and looked under the hood of the car. So I'm looking at the hood, and oh my gosh, I was amazed at how clean the engine was. It looked like it was brand new, like black plastic, or rubberized materials they use under the hood. It was like that, only extremely clean, like somebody had really scrubbed it down. There was no dirt on it anywhere. And I exclaimed to my dad, I said, "Look how clean this is. I'm amazed." And he kind of looks over at me like, huh? Okay. So I bought the car, and I left, and I came back because he had the plates for it. And um, for some reason, I lifted the hood once again. This time, my father was not with me. I was just by myself, and lifted the hood, and the engine was not that clean black rubber and plastic material that I saw when we opened the hood the first time. So that was a vision. Now, normally, when I would have visions, I would have that Star Trek beam me up, Scotty, or beam me down, that sound and the feeling of those beams. It's, it's kind of amazing. They have that in a show. But this time I didn't. I did not even know that it it was a vision. So that can happen. But it's like, well, why did that happen? Why did spirit direct me that way? So my interpretation of that was it was meant for me to have the car. It showed me that the hood was clean, under the hood it was clean, and it would be a good car for me to have. So I think it was more the feeling that the car gave me than its mechanical cleanliness, its mechanical abilities. Okay, um, because I did start to have problems with it. I had the car for several years, and I did start to have problems. And a Thunderbird is an expensive car to fix, but I managed okay. And eventually I traded it in on a new car. But I at least felt really comfortable in that car and safe. So it's more important to feel that safety and the comfort of it. So those visions can come. I've had them come where I would see a symbol of Jesus just out driving. So what I want to tell you about that is if you have any of these experiences, because there are a lot of mystics on the earth right now, where this is a very important time in our human evolution. So a lot of people want to be here for this and to help lift the vibration of humanity, help with the earth's healing, and all of that. So if you do have an experience like that and it scares you or you don't know what happened, um, what I would recommend or suggest is starting to meditate if you're not already, because there has to be a way for these experiences, for this energy to get out. Uh, it it has to be channeled. Okay. So if spirit is trying to get through to you, spirit, your higher self, the source, however you view that, it doesn't matter to me. That's not important. But what is important is to connect with that and to meditate and relax so that your visions will come during your meditation and they don't happen so much out there. Because although I believe I'm safe from all harm, still I don't want to tempt the fates. Now, that wasn't dangerous, seeing a vision of that car engine um, with the hood up. That wasn't a dangerous situation, but I have I used to be pretty spacey, so meditation has really provided a lot of strength and healing for me. So just a word to the wise, okay? So I just have one more story. And this vision, it was in my home. I wrote a book. I self-published a book. And it was about my family and the dysfunction. There was alcoholism, there was a lot of abuse on all levels. It was just a very dysfunctional, unhealthy, unbalanced family dynamic. So I went through a healing for that. And I'm going to recommend, rather than to tell that story because it's in the book, I will recommend that if you're interested in that part of the story, that you get the book. I have some here. You can contact me and I can send you one, or it's on Amazon. I'll give you the link in the description here. It's the direct link because it's not something that's going to be a popular item. It's not going to be number one on the New York sellers um, bestsellers list because of the sensitivity and the issue that is covered. But what I do want to tell you is it took me 20 years to write that book because of the spiritual experience that I went through um, to undo it. And this did have visions in it, it had communication. But after I finished the book, um, this was in 2014, okay? After 20 years of making notes and integrating the journey that I went through like a 15-year initiation. And it was very challenging. If you've ever seen the book entitled Hero with a Thousand Faces by Campbell, is his last name. Um, it's a phenomenal book. It talks about this journey where you're facing these, we'll call them demons within you, these blockages, unblocking and opening up. But you have to have a lot of strength and courage to do this. So that builds up, and then you have the experience of going through this journey. Okay. So I had to heal my childhood, which was very challenging. Um, but anyway, I got through it. And when I finished the book, I looked up, I was on the computer, and it's like, I'm done. And I looked over and I saw my mom and my dad and my sister. Now, they had passed away. So the book was done in 2014, September. My sister died in 2008. My father died in 2011, and my mother died in 2012. So they were all gone. But I could see them. They're jumping up and down and they're rooting. It's like, yay, yay, she did it, she did it. So there's two reasons that I know of for them to be celebrating like they were. For one thing, they were proud of me that I pursued this journey in the first place and wrote it, documented it in the second place, but also because when someone goes through an alcoholic family dynamic or an unhealthy family dynamic, could be drugs, it doesn't matter, whatever causes this abuse. So, one parent in my family was alcoholic. That parent's parent was alcoholic. So there was a family pattern there of alcoholism. So when I healed all of that and finished the book, that heals the generations that I came through. They say 7 generations in the past and 7 generations in the future. That's like, that Jenga game where you're pulling out the little blocks and then it all tumbles down. That's the way it is. Working through these issues, um, even though I was a space case for a long time because I was so wounded, and I'll be telling you stories about that child, the inner child, and uh, that'll be in, let's see, that'll be in number 7, I believe. So, um, so it's really worth it because it brings you to a karma-free state of being. So when we have karma, when we have blockages that need to be addressed, emotions and fears and memories, we need to address those to unblock, and then our path gets smoother so that we do have this ability to commune with nature and with God. Um, because those blockages, that's what a blockage is. It stops us from something. So um, that's how it worked with my family. And I see them come around sometimes, but it's it was very real that they were there. I mean, I could tell that they were like apparitions, but it was very real, and the celebration was very fulfilling and satisfying because I had been treated. I had such low self-esteem in the beginning, growing up, and I just felt horrible about myself. Actually, I tried suicide when I was 23 because I just couldn't bear to live the way I was, the feelings that I had. So let me show you my book. This is it here. Okay. The title of it is I Forgive You, Daddy. Yoga and the Angels Healed Me. So yes, I worked with the angels. And if you know what a walk-in is, that's a little clue for you. The subtitle is Along with the Angels. So along with astrology, channeling, dreams, past life recall, psychicism, telepathy, walk-ins, and the whales. So I already mentioned the story about the whales, but this is the book that took me 20 years to write. So with all the notes I took and the dreams and the journaling I did, it was pretty well documented. So I wasn't going completely from memory, although those notes would tap me into the memory. But this book is available if you're interested. And like I said, I'll put it in the description. And it's some of the people that have read it said they couldn't put it down because it's really interesting, this journey that I went on. But it's too long to go into here. Um, so, anyway, those are my stories. I think I got all of the ones out in the world this time. Finished my book. So, the next Mysti stories will be healing dreams and meditations. It probably won't be as long as this one, but I hope you enjoy the stories, and I hope it gives you glimpses of what it's like, and maybe you're having experiences where um, this will help you along the way. Otherwise, my voice is out there for healing and raising vibrations. So again, if you enjoy these stories and you want to send me a little tip, my PayPal, it's always appreciated. I'm grateful for that and your comments. I've had some nice comments. Thank you so much. And this is the full moon today, and there's a partial solar lunar eclipse. So enjoy that, and just be careful out there. Go forth and meditate. Thanks for being here. Bye bye.